What if I told you the Ukraine war isn't just about Russia and NATO anymore? This conflict has turned into something far bigger, a global chessboard where East Asian powers are moving their pieces. North Korean troops are now fighting alongside Russian forces. China is quietly funneling critical technology to Moscow. And even Japan, a country known for its pacifism, is breaking traditions to support Ukraine. What's going on here? How did a European war become a battleground for global powers? Let's unravel this story. The story of Ukraine's war begins in 2014 when Russia seized Crimea, claiming historical ties and strategic necessity. At that time, it felt like a localized conflict, an extension of Russia's grievances about NATO's eastward expansion. But things didn't stop there. Pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, heavily backed by Moscow, turned the region into a simmering battleground. The world watched, but largely stayed at arm's length. Then, February 2022 happened. Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, betting on a swift victory. But the gamble backfired spectacularly. Ukraine resisted, and NATO nations rallied to its side with weapons, training, and financial aid. Billions of dollars poured in, turning the war into a standoff between Russia and the West. For months, the headlines were dominated by Western sanctions on Moscow and the relentless supply of military aid to Kiev. It seemed like the conflict was locked in the old Cold War dynamic, NATO versus Russia. But a new twist emerged, one few saw coming. Far from Europe, East Asian powers started getting involved in ways that changed the stakes entirely. China, North Korea, Japan, and South Korea were no longer mere spectators. Each had a reason to step in, reshaping what was once a European conflict into a global proxy war. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It's about testing alliances, flexing power, and rewriting the rules of international relations. China has become one of Russia's most crucial backers, but in a way that avoids drawing too much attention. It hasn't sent troops or tanks to Moscow, but its support is just as important. Russia's military and economy are under enormous strain from Western sanctions, and China is filling in the gaps. Every month, China sends over $300 million worth of dual-use goods items that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. These include microchips and machine tools, vital for keeping Russia's defense industry afloat. China is also leveraging its global influence. Beijing has blocked broader condemnations of Russia in international forums and used its relationships with countries in the global south to weaken the West's united front. Recently, Chinese troops participated in military exercises in Belarus, just miles from the Polish border. It was a subtle but clear message. China is watching, and it's ready to act if necessary. But why does China care about Ukraine? The answer lies in its rivalry with the US weakening NATO, and the West is in line with China's long-term goals of reshaping the global order. Beijing also sees Ukraine as a case study for Taiwan. How the world responds to Russia's aggression could set the tone for how it might respond if China moves on Taiwan. For China, this isn't just about helping an ally, it's about testing the limits of Western resolve. North Korea, meanwhile, is taking a much bolder approach. Unlike China, Pyongyang isn't hiding its support for Russia. It has sent artillery shells, ballistic missiles, and, most shockingly, troops. Reports suggest that 10,000 North Korean soldiers are now fighting alongside Russian forces in the Kursk region. On top of that, Kim Jong-un recently signed a military alliance with Vladimir Putin, pledging mutual support in case of attack. This is a significant escalation, even for a country as unpredictable as North Korea. Why take such a risk? For Kim, the benefits are clear. Supporting Russia strengthens ties with a powerful ally and opens the door to advanced military technology that North Korea desperately needs. It's also a chance to stand against the US and prove that Pyongyang is still a force to be reckoned with. Together, China and North Korea have become lifelines for Russia, each playing a unique but crucial role. Their support isn't just about Ukraine, it's about challenging the global dominance of the West. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Japan and South Korea are breaking traditions to support Ukraine. Japan in particular has stepped up in ways that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Traditionally a pacifist nation due to its post-World War II constitution, Japan has become one of Ukraine's top allies in East Asia. It has provided over $12 billion in aid, including humanitarian assistance and military supplies like reconnaissance drones, flak jackets, and vehicles. But Japan's involvement goes beyond financial support. Tokyo has also relaxed its strict weapons export policies, allowing US-made Patriot missiles to reach Ukraine indirectly. This is a big deal for a country that has long avoided any involvement in foreign conflicts. Diplomatically, Japan is using its influence to rally support for Ukraine. During its 2023 G7 presidency, Japan invited nations from the global south to engage with Ukrainian President Zelensky, giving Kyiv a platform to win over new allies. Why is Japan taking such a strong stance? For Prime Minister Kishida Fumio, the war in Ukraine is a wake-up call. Ukraine today may be East Asia tomorrow, he warned. Japan sees the conflict as a warning of what could happen if aggression goes unchecked, particularly with China's increasing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific. South Korea, while more cautious, has also played a significant role. Seoul has provided non-lethal aid, such as mine-clearing equipment and body armor, and joined economic sanctions against Russia. But there's more happening behind the scenes. South Korea has been quietly replenishing US and Polish weapons stockpiles, freeing up resources that can be sent to Ukraine. This indirect support is critical, especially as the war drags on and supplies dwindle. Recently, South Korea has been reconsidering its position. The arrival of North Korean troops in Ukraine has sparked discussions in Seoul about providing direct military support to Kyiv. This would be a major shift for South Korea, but it underscores how seriously it views the growing threats from Pyongyang and Beijing. The involvement of East Asian nations has fundamentally changed the nature of the Ukraine conflict. It's no longer just a fight between Russia and NATO, it's a global power struggle with far-reaching implications. China and North Korea are using the war as an opportunity to challenge the West, while Japan and South Korea are working to uphold international norms and send a message to potential aggressors. This dynamic is reshaping alliances and creating new fault lines in global geopolitics. For example, China's support for Russia is strengthening its ties with other anti-Western nations, while Japan and South Korea are becoming more integrated into NATO's strategic framework. The war has become a testing ground for new alliances and strategies, making it one of the most significant global conflicts in recent history. But with more players involved, the risks are also higher. A miscalculation such as a clash between North Korean troops and NATO forces could escalate the conflict far beyond Ukraine's borders. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It's a stage where global powers are flexing their muscles and testing each other's limits. So why is East Asia so deeply involved in a war halfway around the world? For China, the stakes couldn't be higher. Ukraine is a test case for how the world responds to territorial aggression. If Russia succeeds, it sets a dangerous precedent that could embolden Beijing to move on Taiwan. Supporting Russia also allows China to challenge the US indirectly, weakening its influence without risking direct conflict. North Korea's motivations are more straightforward. By aligning with Russia, Pyongyang gains access to advanced military technology and strengthens its alliance with a key partner. It's also a chance for Kim Jong-un to showcase North Korea's relevance on the global stage and defy Western powers. Japan and South Korea, on the other hand, see Ukraine as a warning. For Japan, the conflict underscores the importance of maintaining international norms and preventing changes to borders by force. For South Korea, it's about countering the growing threat posed by North Korea and its alliance with Russia. Both nations understand that what happens in Ukraine could have serious implications for their own security in the future. The United States has been a cornerstone of Ukraine's defense strategy, funneling billions of dollars into weapons, training, and humanitarian aid. From the outside, it might seem like the US has everything under control. But dig deeper, and cracks start to appear. Questions about the sustainability of American support for Ukraine are growing louder, especially as domestic politics shift. A potential Trump presidency in 2025 looms over this entire scenario. Trump has publicly stated he could end the Ukraine war in a single day, though the details remain vague. If the US were to scale back its involvement under such leadership, the ripple effects would be enormous. Ukraine could lose its largest benefactor, leaving European allies and even East Asian partners like Japan and South Korea scrambling to fill the gap. But the challenges aren't limited to potential political shifts. The US is also grappling with balancing its commitments. On one hand, it must stay the course in Europe, by supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. On the other, it faces increasing pressure to focus on the Indo-Pacific, where China's ambitions and North Korea's provocations are rapidly escalating. This dual-front strategy is stretching U.S. resources thin, raising the question, how long can it sustain this balancing act? Meanwhile, China and North Korea are doubling down on their support for Russia, showing no signs of retreat. Their steady backing ensures that the conflict in Ukraine won't be easily resolved. For the U.S., this means navigating a minefield of competing priorities, all while trying to maintain its leadership role on the global stage. As more players enter the arena, the stakes grow higher, and so do the risks. East Asia's involvement in the Ukraine conflict has added layers of complexity that could spiral into something far more dangerous. Take North Korea's direct support for Russia. With 10,000 troops fighting in Ukraine and a new military alliance with Moscow, Pyongyang is effectively daring NATO and its allies to respond. Any clash involving North Korean forces could provoke retaliation, dragging South Korea or even Japan into the fray. China's role is equally precarious. Its economic lifeline to Russia is already a thorn in the side of Western nations. If Beijing escalates its support by sending weapons or increasing military coordination with Russia, it could trigger harsher sanctions or other countermeasures from the West. This, in turn, could strain global markets and worsen the economic fallout of the war. Then there's the risk of miscalculation. With so many actors involved, from NATO to North Korea to China, the chances of an unintended escalation are alarmingly high. A single misstep, like an accidental clash on NATO's eastern flank or a provocative action in the Indo-Pacific, could ignite a much larger conflict. The interconnected nature of these regions means that a flare-up in Ukraine could easily spill over into Asia and vice versa. The war in Ukraine is no longer just about territorial disputes or political ideologies. It's a battlefield where global powers test their strategies, pushing the limits of their rivals while walking a razor-thin line between calculated risks and catastrophic escalation. The Ukraine war has transformed from a regional struggle into a global showdown. With East Asian powers like China, North Korea, Japan, and South Korea stepping in, the conflict is no longer confined to Europe. Each of these nations has its own reasons for getting involved, from strategic ambitions to national security concerns. But their participation has turned Ukraine into a stage for something much larger, a battle to shape the future of the international order. What happens in Ukraine will echo across the globe, influencing how nations approach conflicts in the future. It's a stark reminder that no country exists in isolation anymore. The stakes are higher than ever, and the risks of escalation are real. If this video gave you a clearer understanding of these complex dynamics, share it with others to spread awareness. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon to stay updated on stories that matter. And don't forget to leave a comment below. What do you think the next move will be in this global chess game? Let's keep the conversation going.